I'm joined now by former Israeli ambassador to the UK and current senior advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Mark Regev. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Ambassador, for being here. We are being told that the U.S. has advised Israel to delay its ground invasion of Gaza in order to allow for more time to get other hostages out. Is that something that the Israeli government is receptive to?
So we want to get the hostages out too. There are people. But we believe the best way to do that is to keep the pressure up on Hamas. This terrorist organization isn't suddenly going to become humanitarian and release hostages because it's the right thing to do. They're going to release hostages because they're under pressure. And so we believe upgrading the pressure on Hamas, that's the military pressure, that's the diplomatic pressure on their allies and supporters abroad. That's the right way to get people out. And as we increase the pressure, we'll see more people released.
Well, I am hoping you could clear something up, because on Saturday, the reporting was that Hamas had offered to release 2 hostages. They provided names. It was widely reported in the media, the regional media at least. But the Prime Minister's office said that was, and I'm quoting the PMO's office now, said it was propaganda lies. Of course, we did just see these 2 women released today. Did Israel initially reject that offer? Can you explain what happened here?
I think this is Hamas disinformation. It's not logical at all to presuppose that Israel would refuse to accept hostages released. It's just ridiculous. It was psychological warfare. Anyone they release, we'll of course accept, and our demand is that there's more than 200 people held hostage. We don't just want 1 or 2 released. We want them all released. They should all be released unconditionally and immediately. And before they're released, they should all be seeing visited by the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is asked to see the hostages. But of course, Hamas has refused that.
Yeah, of course, everyone wants all of the hostages home. I spent a lot of time with their families last week. But is Israel telling Hamas via intermediaries that Israel will only take bigger groups of hostages, or has that changed?
No, Israel's message is clear. We will keep hitting the Hamas military machine. We'll keep applying the pressure. We think, first of all, we're going to defeat Hamas on the battlefield and destroy their military machine. But that pressure is also instrumental in speeding up the release of the hostages.
Is it accurate that Israeli government officials said that they want all the hostages released before the delivery of fuel is allowed into Gaza, as is being reported tonight?
So fuel is a difficult issue. Israel has given the green light for medicine, for water, for food. Humanitarian aid for the civilian population. Obviously, we don't have a problem with that. Fuel, unfortunately, is essential for the Hamas military machine. They need it for their rockets. They need it for their underground terror network of tunnels. And we understand that. And we had a documented case last week where fuel, I think 6 tankers, CNN reported, went in through the Rafah crossing with Egypt. And then that fuel, a large proportion of it, and it was said, of course, the fuel's going to generators in hospitals to help save lives, and yet Hamas, at gunpoint, stole a large proportion of that fuel, and we presume it was diverted to their military machine. And we've said to the Americans, and President Biden has addressed this issue publicly, yes, if supplies that are meant for the people of Gaza, that are supposed to alleviate human suffering, are in fact stolen by Hamas, there must be consequences.
But is the delivery of more fuel tonight conditional on the release of all the hostages?
No, at the moment, we have no interest in more fuel going to the Hamas military machine, and we have not authorized fuel. We've authorized medicine, we've authorized water, we've authorized foodstuffs. We've not authorized anything else. And we're in a state of war with Hamas, and we have no interest whatsoever in helping them beef up their military machine. On the contrary, okay, we want to destroy their military machine.
So just to be clear, even if they released all the hostages, that doesn't change your mind on fuel being allowed into Gaza. Is that right?
The government decision is that fuel doesn't go in because it'll be stolen by Hamas, and it'll be used by them to power rockets that are fired into Israel to kill our people.
We've all been talking about when this ground invasion is going to occur. Of course, what that is going to look like. We've heard from the U.S. that they've urged the Israeli government to delay it. Do you believe that a ground invasion, if it goes forward, makes the release of more hostages less likely, sir?
We don't take a ground incursion lightly. First of all, there's the fate of the hostages. And secondly, we know that our young soldiers going into battle, it'll be dangerous. I mean, Hamas has dug in. They've got their underground network of tunnels. They've got their booby traps. They've got their bunkers. It'll be difficult fighting, and I'm realistic. I know that those young soldiers going into battle will face life-threatening situations, and unfortunately, not all of them will come back alive, and that's a sad reality. Though I was speaking to some young soldiers, and they're committed to this. They know it needs to be done. They know that we cannot continue to live beside this terror enclave. So in a ground incursion into Gaza, we take it very seriously. We know the risks involved, both for the hostages and for our fighting men. But this has to be done. Let's be clear. Israel refuses to go back to the sort of reality of 6 a.m. on October 7th, where we live next to this terrorist enclave, and they can inflict the sort of deadly, horrific, gruesome violence that they inflicted upon us. We refuse to live that way anymore. We will destroy Hamas's military machine. And in so doing, not only do we better protect our own people and safeguard their security, but I believe we create opportunities for a better reality for the people of Gaza, who for 16 years have lived under Hamas rule, which has only brought them hardship and suffering and impoverishment.
Yeah, well, there are still major questions, though, about what happens to the Palestinian civilians if Israel is successful. And no one has really articulated who would be in charge of Gaza if that does happen. But when you look at what happened and President Biden being in Tel Aviv last week, sitting in on that wartime cabinet meeting, how much influence does the U.S. have over when Israel does move forward with that ground invasion?
Look, America is our best friend. It's our strongest ally. And in Israel, people have appreciated greatly President Biden's forthright support, and not just in his words, but in his actions. He's giving us the tools we need. He's replenishing our armaments so we have the tools we need to defeat Hamas. And by moving those two carrier groups to the region, he's shown that, he wants to deter others who might see the war in Gaza as an excuse to attack Israel on another front. I mean, we have nothing but praise for President Biden. And of course, when you have a good friend, you listen to what they have to say. But Israel is a sovereign country, and we'll make our own decisions according to our own assessment of our national security.
You are a senior advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu. When we hear from some officials or some former military officers who say that they believe he should resign over how this was handled, over the government's role and lack of a response, a slow response on that day. When you speak to him, I mean, does he accept responsibility, any responsibility for what happened on October 7th in terms of how the government handled that?
I mean, in Israel, there's no shortage of former officers, and they've all got their own opinions. And you'll have a whole range of opinions across the spectrum. But I think it's clear we have to do a serious, when this is over, yes? When we've defeated Hamas, then there's going to be, of course, an intense public conversation in Israel about lessons learned and mistakes made. I mean, first of all, we were surprised. Intelligence didn't get in time that Hamas was going to launch this brutal, murderous attack that they did on October 7th. I mean, they massacred us because we weren't prepared and there wasn't the warning. Second, we have to ask, why is it that the fence that we'd spent so much time in building and the technology and so forth, which was supposed to be an impassable barrier, that they passed it so quickly and relatively easily? And thirdly, there's a question of why did it take us so long to clear out those terrorists who infiltrated into Israel? And it's true, there were a lot of them, over 1,000. But still, it took us days, as you will recall, for us to clear out our own sovereign territory from Hamas terrorists who were roaming and killing and keeping people hostage and so forth. So for all these reasons and more, we need to have serious investigations. Ultimately, we have to learn from our mistakes. And the only way you learn from the mistakes is by studying exactly what happened. And there will be lessons learned. But to be fair, I think the focus today has to be on winning this war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us. But having been put in this situation, we will win it. We'll win it on our terms. And there's definitely going to be, when this is over, a serious process of looking at lessons that need to be learned.
Ambassador Mark Regev, thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me, Caitlin. Much appreciated.
And I should note, as far as his comments